Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I don't even know how this all started. One day, a random username I didn't recognize added me on Snapchat. I usually add back anyone from school or work, so I accepted the request without thinking much of it. Looking back now, I wish I had just ignored it. At first, it was normal enough, just some guy sending me typical Snapchat selfies to say hey. But soon the pictures got weirdly frequent. I had opened the app and had 10 snaps waiting from him. The photos were all innocuous, but the rapid fire rate gave me the creeps. Then he started sending chat messages along with the pictures. Things like, "You look really nice today," or asking, "What are you up to?" At no point had we ever met in person, so the overly familiar tone was bizarre. His excessive communication was seriously freaking me out. I tried just leaving his messages on read and not engaging, hoping he would take the hint. But the texts kept flooding in, getting needier and aggressive. He'd say things like, "Why are you ignoring me?" And "I just want to get to know you better. Don't be rude." After a week of this, I'd had enough. I blocked his account, relieved to not have this stranger constantly blowing up my notifications anymore. I figured that would be the end of a weird, uncomfortable situation. Oh, how wrong I was. Just a few days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number texting me. The message said, "Why did you block me? I thought we were friends." My stomach dropped, realizing it was the Snapchat creeper reaching me my phone now. I never responded, but he kept texting me relentlessly, as if I had replied and was engaging. He would ask prying questions about who I was with and what I was wearing. When I confronted him asking how he had gotten my number, he just said he had ways. The messages got more and more unsettling. He would text things like, "You look pretty in that outfit today," meaning he had seen me in person before, or "That test looked hard this morning, so he knew my class schedule." I was beyond freaked out knowing this virtual stranger was not only cyber stalking me, but tracking me in real life too. I blocked the number, but he would just text me from a new one each time. He was clearly obsessed and unhinged. At this point, I knew I had to get my parents and the school involved. I showed them the deeply creepy messages, and they agreed this guy needed to be reported. I also beefed up my social media privacy settings just to be safe. But he became enraged when he realized I had told on him. His texts got angrier, saying I would regret trying to get him in trouble. He said he thought we had a connection, and that I had betrayed him terribly. I was genuinely afraid walking to classes alone or being anywhere isolated on campus. What if this unstable, angry guy tried to physically confront me out of spite? He knew my routines, schedules, what I looked like, everything. My friends agreed to travel in packs and keep an eye out for any suspicious characters. I kept screenshots of the unsettling texts as evidence for the school administration and police. But with no clues on the stalker's identity, they could only do so much. One evening, I came home to find the backyard gate mysteriously unlocked. My parents were obsessive about keeping it latched, so alarm bells went off right away. I paused outside the gate, straining to hear anything unusual. When I was met with silence, I cautiously crept inside. The motion sensor lights flipped on as I edged down the walkway. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. But as I drew closer to the house, I heard a faint rustling sound from the bushes below my bedroom window. My heart seized in my chest. I moved toward the noise and thought I saw the bushes quiver slightly, as if someone was hiding inside them. My mind raced. Was the Snapchat stalker here outside my window, escalating his frightening obsession? Had he been violating the sanctity of my own home while terrorizing me digitally? I flipped on the backyard floodlights, flooding the area in harsh brightness. As soon as the space was illuminated, I saw the bushes violently shake. To my horror, a figure dressed entirely in black emerged halfway, then turned and ran toward the back fence. I stood paralyzed for a moment, watching the dark silhouette scramble over the fence and out of sight. Snapping out of my terrified daze, I fumbled for my phone and called the cops with trembling hands. I could barely get the words out between panicked sobs as I explained my stalker had been lurking right outside my window. Within minutes, multiple police cars arrived with flashing lights, the noise jolting my parents awake. They rushed downstairs to comfort me as I recounted the alarming backyard sighting. The police searched the entire property and perimeter, but found no signs of intrusion or suspicious clues left behind. Terrified of being alone, I'd begged my parents to let me change schools or even move away, but we couldn't give in to this terrorist, letting him rule our lives. So we instead got a security system installed, kept the yard lit up at night, and made sure at least one family member was always home with me. Gradually, the creepy messages tapered off and stopped altogether. Maybe he gave up when he realized he couldn't get to me or found some other poor girl to target with his unhinged obsession. I still glance over my shoulder when walking places alone, though, scarred by the traumatic experience. I've learned my lesson about accepting random social media contacts ever again. That one seemingly harmless ad unleashed a waterfall of terror I'm still recovering from today. In hindsight, leaving my Snapchat maps public was an incredibly stupid decision, like dangling myself as bait in front of unseen predators lurking in the darkness. At the time, location sharing felt fun and harmless. My friends and I enjoyed tracking each other throughout the day, seeing where we were hanging out or killing time between classes. It all seemed so innocent. That false sense of security swiftly collapsed once the creepy messages began trickling in. They started after random Snapchat users I didn't know began adding me, likely having found my profile through my open maps showing my location at all times. At first, I thought maybe they were just classmates or acquaintances trying to connect, so I unwittingly accepted their requests. To my regret, this opened the door for what quickly escalated into targeted harassment. It began gradually with typical selfies saying innocent things like, "Hey," or "What's up?" If bored, I'd politely chat back with these strangers, though our conversations never got deep. In hindsight, they were clearly just trying to gain my trust at first. I brushed off their increasingly probing questions about my location and plans as normal chatting. But soon, the conversations took an unmistakably creepy turn. Once these strangers had ingratiated themselves, their casual small talk shifted to aggressively pressing me for personal details about my day. Where was I going next? Who was I meeting up with? What were my exact plans and movements? When I tried laughingly deflecting that I didn't like to discuss my business so publicly, they turned demanding and forceful, insisting I immediately tell them my precise location at that very moment, as well as a full schedule of my routine hangouts and activities. Their tone became hostile and entitled, and I firmly reiterated my discomfort, as if I owed them open access to my life simply for existing as a woman online. I became deeply unsettled, but attempted to write it off as just awkward men trying desperately to flirt through misguided means. Looking back now, I was painfully oblivious to the obvious warning signs something far more sinister was afoot. Their probing questions were merely a preamble for the disturbing harassment set to unfold. If only I had reported them then, instead of giving them benefit of the doubt. Within mere days, outright frightening snaps began arriving from these supposedly friendly accounts. I'd received photos of intensely familiar locations. The quaint coffee shop I stopped at each morning, the front of my own dorm building, the gym where I exercised several times a week, with chilling captions reading "I saw you here earlier." The horrific implications slowly dawned on me like a punch to the gut. By leaving my location freely visible, I had unwittingly enabled these strangers to outright stalk me in real life. They were apparently lingering around places my snap map showed I frequented, simply to take photos and send them to me later as proof they had been tracking me. Utterly panicked, I immediately scrambled to turn off public access to my maps, my hands shaking so hard I could barely navigate the app's settings. But much to my escalating horror, disabling location sharing failed to halt the deeply disturbing messages. "Where are you right now?" They would randomly demand at all hours or send shots clearly taken at that very moment wherever I was. Campus, a friend's house, the store, indicating they were still closely monitoring my real-world movements, even without the map's help. My stomach churned imagining one of these demented individuals following me, watching from a distance for glimpses through windows or circling the block, endlessly waiting for me to emerge somewhere. The digital harassment had fully bled into reality. I felt exposed, unprotected, and completely violated in my own skin. No police report or block could undo the power and control I had blindly surrendered to anonymous tormentors. I realized much too late that my perception of online anonymity had fostered a dangerously false comfort. I had willingly offered myself up not to friends, but to wolves who now could isolate and prey upon me further at any time. There was no closing Pandora's box. The darkness had already been unlocked. Going anywhere alone became an anxiety-inducing ordeal, constantly wondering if one of these lurkers was following me or preparing to ambush me. I found myself whipping my head around to scrutinize every passerby, looking for cell phones aimed in my direction. My friends had to start escorting me everywhere like bodyguards, just so I could feel moderately safe. Some of the more unhinged creeps managed to take things even further, somehow figuring out my class schedule or home address. I'd receive chilling snaps like "can't wait to see you in Psych 101 later," or "nice place you've got," alongside photos of my apartment building's exterior. I reported every account I could, only for new ones to spring up almost immediately after. With no identities to pinpoint, the police could do little besides taking reports for documentation. I felt powerless, violated, and completely alone in my nightmare. For a period, I became nearly agoraphobic, only leaving home when 100% necessary. But allowing these anonymous online deviants to completely control and disrupt my life was unacceptable. I started taking steps to regain some semblance of power over the situation. I refused to open any snaps from unfamiliar accounts, instantly blocking anyone who tried to contact me. My social media was made completely private, my digital footprint erased. I varied my daily routines often so no single pattern could be identified and exploited. Gradually, the unnerving messages tapered off when the creeps could no longer get a reaction or pinpoint data from me. But I remained wary in public, avoiding posting locations online and staying hyper-vigilant about strangers near me. Running into familiar faces from school years later can be a mixed bag. You're excited to catch up, but often realize you've grown apart. I learned that the hard way when I crossed paths with my old classmate Jamie after nearly a decade. On the surface, we reunited friends, but it turns out we now ran in very different circles. I was grabbing coffee when I heard a familiar voice call my name. I turned to see Jamie waving enthusiastically. We had been casual acquaintances back in high school, so I was happy to see a blast from the past. We chatted about old teachers and classmates, reminiscing about our shenanigans from back in the day. When Jamie asked to add me on Snapchat so we could continue our catch-up, I readily agreed. It would be nice to maintain contact with an old pal, I thought. Little did I know the sinister secrets lurking on the other side of that seemingly innocent friend request. At first, things were fine. Jamie added me to a Snapchat group with some other people I vaguely knew from school. We shared silly selfies and memes, just some old classmates joking around via social media. Harmless, nostalgic fun, or so I assumed. At first, I tried brushing it off as normal teenage rebellion when Jamie's friends started bragging about petty crimes like shoplifting clothes or using fake ID. But soon, the snaps took an exponentially darker and more disturbing turn. Their casual banter gravitated toward discussing much harder felonies, armed bank robberies, violently carjacking innocent people, breaking into homes, and even physically assaulting those who dared cross them. They described such predatory criminal activities with a chilling sense of pride and accomplishment. I was beyond unsettled listening to them recount traumatic crimes they had allegedly carried out against others with zero remorse. This was no longer adolescent mischief. It had crossed into sociopathic criminal territory. My alarm only grew as their conversations would frequently turn to plotting disturbing future hits, discussing strategies to avoid getting caught, and reminiscing fondly about past victims like trophies. They truly seemed to revel in the power and thrill their violence evoked. When I urgently informed Jamie in private that I was extremely uncomfortable and wanted absolutely no part in this, their response sent a bone-chilling shudder down my spine. They demanded I stay in the group chat since I already knew too much about their activities to just casually walk away now. Jamie said since I had already witnessed them brazenly discussing countless felonies, they couldn't take the risk of me exposing or snitching on them. Their tone made it clear this was not a friendly suggestion, but a sinister threat looming over me. When I firmly insisted I was leaving the group anyway regardless of their threats, the explicit menacing mornings began pouring in. I was told in vivid detail that if I breathed a word about their crimes, they would hunt me down and make sure you won't be able to snitch ever again. The graphic specifics still nauseate me to this day. They said they were closely watching and tracking me already and could easily get to me if I tried to blow the whistle. I was utterly terrified at realizing these were not just rebellious teens fooling around, but truly unhinged and dangerous young adults. I became afraid to leave my house alone, constantly paranoid Jamie or their unhinged friends might confront or violently attack me if I was spotted. Just going to class or work became a terrifying ordeal. At school, I urgently reported the graphic harassment and death threats to campus police, showed them the profoundly unsettling snaps, and requested escorts between all classes, work, and activities. But with the culprit's full identity still unclear, the police frustratingly said there was little they could proactively do beyond documenting the information in case something happened. I had never felt more trapped and alone, haunted by these unstable sociopaths, yet powerless to prevent them from further twisting the knife of fear deeper at any moment. They had successfully seized control through intimidation, leaving me living in constant hypervigilance. The threats overshadowed every moment, awake or asleep, a living nightmare I felt I may never wake up from. I decided my only option was to lay low and gathered evidence against them secretly in case something happened. I kept note of their usernames, saved threatening messages, and never went anywhere alone or unfamiliar. After a few tense weeks, the creepy snaps tapered off, though I remained on high alert. Perhaps they assumed I was too scared to expose them, or got distracted scheming their next delinquent stunt. While I felt profoundly relieved, I also couldn't shake a sense of guilt. Were Jamie and their friends always capable of such violence and cruelty, even as teenagers? Should I have seen glimmers of warning signs back then and spoken up sooner? The whole traumatic ordeal taught me our perceptions of people can be frighteningly inaccurate. Jamie had seemed a bit mischievous perhaps, but not malicious. Now here they were entangled in full criminal activity years later. I suppose their unsettling path was a cautionary example. Seemingly small acts of defiance can snowball into dangerous territory when validated and unchecked. The seeds of harm often germinate long before manifesting openly. I still hope Jamie and their friends get the help they clearly need before it's too late, but I had to distance myself for my own safety. Sometimes the healthiest choice is letting go. I guess this unnerving saga goes to show how technology can reconnect us in both wondrous and sinister ways. A double-edged sword, linking us fluidly across time and distance, yet also obscuring what lurks just beneath the surface, for better or worse. In my case, one swipe added old friends who turned out to be chilling strangers. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.